on Terran warriors. A story by user PepperAntique. When the Terrans first joined the Galactic Party, not much was thought of it. New species come and go all the time. They were a bit odd. They only controlled 3 star systems, and they were massively overpopulated. Additionally, their ships, while somewhat brutalist in design, were incredibly well armed, especially for a species that had known no external conflict. But they weren't the only ones like that. Physically, they were average, nothing terribly special. Limb count was below average, but not impressively so. Eyesight was a bit better than most. Strength was average, though with large levels of variance. Startlingly durable when it came to damage resistance, but when all was said and done, not anything to write home about. Their culture was where they differ from the rest of the galaxy the most, mainly because they don't have just one. Instead, they have many. Indeed, in all my years, I have never met a species so diverse as humans. It seems as though every single individual human has a vastly different culture from the next. You can grab 100 random humans and put them in a room. While some may have similar cultures, you will very likely end up finding 100 separate cultures within that group. And that is what makes human soldiery so vastly different from those of other species. I am not a social scientist or even a regular scientist. I am a simple Corel military commander. I do not study these things. I study tactics, weapon systems, military history, leadership skills, and every so often maybe a bit of philosophy. The humans have a particularly interesting military philosopher by the name of Sun Tzu, who I have come to admire greatly. But that is a story for a different time. When I first saw a human military unit, I was a mere Klepsten. This is a Corel rank equivalent to what humans call a buck sergeant. It was in the middle of the Clendathune campaign against the vile Maril techno hive mind. My base had been under siege for nearly 2 months. Supplies and morale were running low. With void supremacy not yet definitively claimed by either side, it wasn't looking good for us. I was in charge of the few men left of my unit. Our lead officer had been killed several days prior. The humans arrived on a dropship roughly the size of a barracks building, and when it landed right in the middle of our base, it opened up to offload roughly 100 human soldiers. Then, after they'd offloaded, the ship detached the portion that the soldiers had been in, compacted itself into a small flying craft, and flew off back into orbit. Indeed, it turned out that the ship was the size of a barracks building because the container it left behind was intended to be the humans' barracks building. The soldiers were not impressive to look at. The tallest human, excluding those of Sigma Terrace, whose gravity had caused them to lengthen, is only tall enough to reach a Koran's chest. They weren't wearing deflective armor. Their weapons were small, darkly colored pieces of metal with no energy fields present. Each soldier seemed to be equipped differently, some wearing heavier or lighter padding, some with larger or smaller weapons, some with no weapons at all. There was no uniformity to their loadouts, save for the color scheme. On top of that, they practiced no drill and ceremony, simply disembarking and scattering to different parts of the base to do Triss knows what. One of them was yelling at the other humans to get them moving faster. I would find out later that he was a sergeant, effectively my equal in their ranks. Our base commander met with an older human with a gold bird on his cap and saluted with him. Then they began talking and walking over to the command center. Our commander was limping from an injury, but the human lent him a hand and kept pace with him. I was disgusted by the display. No uniformity, no ceremony, none of it made sense. Every civilized species out there kept their units limited to singular soldier types. And if you were arriving at a new post, you were supposed to display your military's glory by presenting them to the present command. These humans were absurd. But the humans did something that immediately boosted the morale of everyone left on the base. Every single watch shift was cancelled. Every Corel unit was to report to their barracks for mandatory R&R, as the humans put it. We had been strictly adhering to our military's combat sleep rationing system. These consisted of rotating 2-hour guard shifts, followed by 2-hour equipment and health maintenance, followed by another 2-hour guard shift. These would continue alternating until mandatory sleep cycles. Corel require a minimum of 10 hours of sleep in order to maintain health and effectiveness. We become unavoidably lethargic and irrational without enough sleep. I've seen sleep-deprived Corel soldiers killed without even noticing it, offering basically zero resistance while it happened. The humans, it seemed, were immediately taking over guard duty. They knew about our sleep schedule requirements and wanted us to be as close to 100% as possible. When I heard the next day what their guard shifts were like, I damn near spit up my rations. The humans were taking 12 18-hour shifts. I thought the Klep Nil, human equivalent of private, was trying to make a fool of me. But when I checked the data readout to see what the schedules were like, it confirmed his statement. What kind of creature could withstand shifts of more than a few hours? Upon confirming this, I immediately rushed to see my company commandant. The humans were insane and foolish. No creature could stay awake that long without rest. We would be destroyed if the enemy decided to attack while a human guard fell to slumber while on watch. This had to be some kind of treachery. The humans had to be working with the Marill. My commandant silenced me. These were orders from the base commander himself. Apparently, humans only required 8 hours of sleep to be fully functional, and even then could be stretched using human stimulants and discipline. Apparently, 18-hour shifts was actually considered an easy shift to the humans. According to the commandant, the human commander, a Colonel Richardson, had said that in non-combat situations they would have their soldiers slotted for 24-hour shifts. The 18-hour shifts were simply to ensure that even the guards would get enough rest to maintain combat readiness. To top it off, their idea of enough rest was only 4 hours. What were these humans? I was surprised when, as the days passed, I noticed many of my own soldiers fraternizing with the humans. I had avoided this as much as possible, only interacting with them when my duties required it, and even then keeping the interactions as short as possible. Their military doctrines and horrendous sleep requirements confused me, but my men seemed to be enjoying the humans' company. Base morale had skyrocketed after the guard rotations had been temporarily halted. I couldn't deny that a full sleep cycle, and a chance to eat and perform my necessary hygiene to a satisfactory standard had been incredibly refreshing. But it was the non-duty activities of the humans that had really begun to raise morale. This would be the first time I would experience the true variances of human subcultures. Some humans would spend their downtime playing games they were more than happy to introduce Corel soldiers to. I would end up having to put a limit on this, as some soldiers were wagering personal supplies and credit chits. Some humans would gather to sing songs and even play instruments they'd brought with them. This activity I had no issue with. Some of the songs were even catchy, until one soldier with a thick accent I couldn't understand brought out a strange instrument consisting of an inflatable bladder with a series of pipes attached to it. It sounded horrendous. Other humans would cook or create small works of art, or tell stories and jokes. Some would engage in barbarous displays that the humans called sports. These all seemed to involve using various parts of their bodies to hit things, sometimes each other. Some of their sports involved engaging in hand-to-hand combat with each other, but the commandant insisted that these were all normal human activities. I could prevent my men from partaking in them, but the humans would not be stopped. Apparently, these activities were necessary for their morale. 3.5 days after the humans arrived, I finally got to see them in combat, and my dislike of them was negated by what I witnessed. I had been nearing my required sleep cycle, and as a result was incredibly groggy and barely coherent. Then the alarm sounded. I woke up a little bit more, still groggy but a bit more aware, and grabbed my rifle from its rack behind my office desk. As I rushed out the door, the base was in mayhem. My troops were gathering their rifles and forming squad squares as they were supposed to. This allowed us to deploy necessary units to the necessary positions. The humans, on the other hand, were scrambling. Each human soldier had grabbed their weapon, not difficult as they were always at hand anyways, and to enable their armor as well. Some had been caught completely unaware and were only wearing their small clothes, typically just a pair of shorts and a shirt. They were simply running to the nearest wall or tower. They were as chaotic as their arrival had been. It was embarrassing to see, and my anger at them rose back up. And then they started firing at the incoming Marill. I did not know what happened at first, and from the way many of my men threw themselves to the ground, they must not have either. Corel weapons utilize centrifugally slung plasma projectiles. They make a slight whirring noise when they fire, and the plasma projectiles hiss as they fly, but they are mainly silent. Human weapons are not silent. The humans opened up on the Marill with their small metal weapons, and terrified every Corel on the base. It was like the entirety of the base was exploding, or at least that's what it sounded like. I would find out later that this wasn't an entirely inaccurate conclusion. The humans were using kinetic weapons, and those weapons were powered by small directional explosions. Some of their weapons were semi-automatic, only firing 1 round at a time. Others were burst fire, counting 3 to 4 rounds each time they were triggered. But a select few were fully automatic, simply expending ammo at a fast, consistent, and loud rate of fire. Every single human on the base, with the exception of a few of their medical staff, was firing on Marill. No hesitation, no fear, no organized volleys. They had only waited for the authorization to do so, and then they'd begun firing. I covered my auditory sensors with a cloth strip, trying to muffle the cacophony of gunfire, and rushed up the nearest tower to see the effect this madness was having. What I saw made no sense. With the exception of larger automatic weapons, those that sat on bipods or even embedded turret stands, none of the human weapons actually seemed to be firing anything. And even those larger automatics were only firing oddly arced laser rounds that seemed to occasionally ricochet. That didn't make any sense. The Marill weren't wearing reflective armor. How were those lasers ricocheting? Hell, how did they even have an arc to their trajectories? Why weren't the humans actually firing anything? But for some reason, the Mrill were dying, and not just a few of them. The Mrill were being annihilated by some invisible force, shredded, punctured, and blasted apart by something unseen. And where those occasional lasers hit, they were preceded by following additional impacts. What was happening here? They continued to fight for 8 more minutes. Then the Mrill began to withdraw. And that was when the humans did something I never in 1,000 cycles would have expected. They leaped over the walls or rushed through the open gates. Why were the gates even opened? And began to charge the Mrill. They rushed forward in small 2 to 3 man groups. Those not rushing would continue firing at the retreating Mrill, while avoiding the area their comrades were rushing forward. Then those troops that had rushed would stop, kneel, or even lie down prone, and commence with firing again. While they did this, the troops that had previously been covering them would stop firing and rush forward. They would alternate like this over and over as they proceeded up the field. They chased the Mrill past the nearby hills before stopping. They left a trail of Mrill dead in their wake. The entire maneuver had occurred almost immediately, and with only minimal communication between the humans. And their timing on the movements had been so perfectly in sync that for a moment I had thought that they were the hive mind, not the Mrill. An hour later, after the charging humans had returned, and after the wounded had been treated, few as they were, the humans celebrated. Alcohol and food were prepared and enjoyed by all. Well, not the alcohol, it's toxic to Corel. And a great party was had. I had no idea what was happening. Celebration was not part of war. But my men were apparently more than eager to join. We had just earned a great victory. Or at least, the humans had. We Corellians had basically stood by, shaking in our leg wrappings. But the human celebratory party could not be halted. The rest of the campaign went much the same way, humans slowly integrating us into their different cultural oddities. We learned to fight alongside them. I learned the reason I could not see their projectiles was because of their small size and insane speed. Eventually, I relented and joined a game known as Farkle. I still have the dice I won from one of the games. I even ended up making several lifelong friends. I discovered that the reason humans lacked true uniformity was because of their belief in specialization. A unit of 10 human soldiers will likely have 4 or 5 specialist members. Medics are common, as well as engineers who actually tend to do the opposite of building, marksmen, heavy weapons gunners, and more. The idea is that each squad needs to be as capable of as many jobs as possible, but each member of the squad was expected to specialize in at least one field. This allowed their team members to focus on a field of expertise of their liking. They could even apply to attend training for their chosen specialization. It also helped improve their morale. A soldier was found to be happier when working on a skill they preferred. It also occasionally allowed them to temporarily outrank their superiors. Most NCOs, as middling ranks were called, and officers would defer their decisions to lower-ranked soldiers on certain issues. These temporary power shifts were due to a soldier being a subject matter expert, and gave the lower soldiers some level of control of their own actions from time to time. All of these factors were confusing to me at first. I'd initially thought the humans chaotic, disheveled, foolish, and embarrassing. But after seeing them in combat, after seeing them stand watch many times longer than any Corel could even attempt, seeing them maintain morale even during the worst times, seeing them react to situations almost as effectively as any hive mind, I realized that all these things were the real human culture. Their subcultures were what made them work so well together. 2 human soldiers could hate each other as mutual enemies, but they would still band together and fight by each other's side with zero hesitation, and do so in fanatic fashion. It has been nearly 30 years since I first fought alongside those humans. 10 years since the Corel government welcomed humans with open arms into our society, and 3 years since they were welcomed into our military. I am a Klep Sur now, the equivalent of a human colonel. I was the first commander to welcome the humans into our ranks without any restrictions, the first to adopt the human concept of specialization. My fellow officers laughed at me and called me a fool, but my battalion's victories have shut them up. My men's morale has kept our desertion and suicide rates lower than any other unit, and my human soldiers have begun to outrank some of those naysayers. I am proud to march alongside my human brethren. I am proud to act like them now. Klep Sur von Largo, upon being promoted to Klep Sal and Galactic Party Defense Minister. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you're new here, welcome aboard. Check out the description for the story, and join the Discord if you like. Consider supporting the channel and the author as well. It's a dangerous world out there, But remember to be brave and look up to seek the stars.